Welcome to Shareholders of a Better World, brought to you by TBLI Group. At TBLI Group, we have an established reputation as an organization dedicated to building the ecosystem of global sustainability and impact investing. We're doing this through educating, advising, and facilitating transactions in global sustainability and impact business, as well as capital solutions for private companies, family offices, and fund groups. For nearly 25 years, TBLI Group has created a vertically integrated ecosystem of education to action through TBLI conferences and TBLI consulting. More about our company can be found at tbligroup.com. This webinar is brought to you by TBLI Foundation, which hosts educational learning experiences dedicated to a better planet. Through the foundation, we build sustainable communities by sharing the people and the experiences making a difference to so many of our lives around the world. Our weekly podcasts bring impact thought leaders that are doing and not only chatting. Now let me introduce my guest today.
Greetings from our studio in Amsterdam, and our guest. I'm really honored to have a very, very dear friend, a very old friend. Before I introduce him, just some housekeeping instructions. For those of you that have never joined before, if you need to ask a question or a comment in the lower right-hand corner, the emojis are there to clap or laugh or say that something is brilliant. If you need to send a private message to someone, just move your mouse over the person's photo and a screen will pop up and you can send them a private message. So our guest today is Thierry Sanders, who is probably one of the most prolific social entrepreneur, accelerator, incubator, just all around brilliant guy who's over the years has just created so many successful enterprises. And for the last several years, he's been in Indonesia, he's back in the Netherlands, to create a million, I think was the original idea, a million social entrepreneurs. So Thierry, tell us your story. What have you been doing? What are you doing now? And how did this whole idea of creating so many social entrepreneurs in Indonesia come about?
Robert, this is very embarrassing. I'm going to have to live up to those standards that you just mentioned. So, no. So, Robert invited me to basically give a bit of a talk about, how what my meandering path has been, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. Hopefully, lots of time for Q&A after that. But when on starting, I would like to share one of the most pleasurable and at the same time most painful memories of my childhood. And that was, I was walking just behind my dad, and to my right was a conveyor belt with literally hundreds of lollipops on it. And I just grabbed one of those lollipops, I put it in my mouth, and the steam just emerged from my mouth. They were boiling hot. They just come out of a machine. And so there we were in a sweet factory, which was, of course, a very pleasurable memory. Sweet factory in Karachi, Pakistan. And the great thing about my childhood was that my dad would take me to like cement factories, to oil palm plantations, to cattle ranches in Saudi, Ecuador, Paraguay, all these different places. And you may have guessed he's a banker, or he was a banker until he retired. And he was financing these really big projects and factories. But in the reality, outside of these very well organized businesses, was this busy, chaotic, crowded streets in Karachi, in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, in Quito, Ecuador. And that's where all the real busyness was happening. So I guess that's where the word business comes from. It's from busyness, and all the busyness was not in these factories. it was out on the streets. And most of the people out there were poor. So I decided, okay, university, I really want to understand this a bit better. So I decided to study development economics in England. And basically my mind was being programmed to think about trickle-down economics, economies of scale, and very often centralized approaches to organizing businesses and structuring organizations. But yeah, what we see on a daily basis in reality is it's not trickle-down economics that's happening. It's actually trickle-up economics. So, you know, a lot more money is ending up in the hands of the rich, and the poor don't seem to be getting any richer. And the middle classes haven't really seen an effective increase in their incomes since the 70s. So I was keen on figuring out, okay, how can we get trickle-up economics work? How can we also not focus on economies of scale, but economies of small that are scalable? And also, instead of trying to organize everything in a sort of centralized way, how can we organize decentralized approaches to doing business? So yeah, just to sort of give some examples, I'm not a fan of Amazon. I'm much more a fan of Shopify. And Indonesia has, because of course everyone's living the reality there, in Indonesia you see companies that are now unicorns like Tokopedia or Bukalapak. They have no storage facility. They have no sort of major central organization. They work with lots of SME suppliers. The same if you look at big utility companies. Many of them are suffering currently. You have, at the same time, a growing network of smart grid companies making use of the energy generated at homes or small businesses and sharing the peaks and the troughs with each other. The same with plantations. So you have outgrower farming as a sort of opposite to plantations, where they have a shared factory to process their harvest, as many agricultural cooperatives are organized. So I think from my childhood and university and some of the thinking that came out of that, my goal after that was to look at ways to create scalable small businesses that improve the quality of life for all involved at a profit, which is essentially how I would define a social enterprise. So scalable small businesses that improve the quality of life for all involved at a profit. And so to kind of put this to practice, I bumped into two guys called John van Duursen and Dirk Noorde. And together we decided to create the first online business plan competition platform. And it was around this time, it was 2004, that I had already met Robert Rubenstein, who had been my mentor for several years on how to match make investors with startups, with impact startups. And so from that, we developed something called Bid Network, which was an online business plan competition system, but it was a closed database. So all these entrepreneurs would submit their business plans. They were all based in developing countries, which is where I'd lived most of my life. And but these entrepreneurs didn't know who the other entrepreneurs were. So there was no kind of open system that we see today on all social media. So a year later, we found a system. We were inspired by MySpace because Facebook was not around at the time. And we thought we need something like MySpace so that the entrepreneurs can find each other. They can match with mentors and investors. And so we created this sort of three-way dating site for mentors, investors, and entrepreneurs. And as far as we know, that was probably the very first global platform to do that. So our focus was impact businesses, whether startup or already operational for several years. And we made no money doing that. It was all sponsored. We had to find grants from the ministries of foreign affairs, from FMO, Rabobank, KPMG helped provide a lot of their consultants. And we essentially, I think if we backtrack, had some over 50,000 business plans on the platform. We had around 2,500 investors, 3,000 mentors on the platform, and there was a lot happening that we were not aware of. So we managed to, if we'd taken a 1% share in each of the companies that registered, it would have been an amazing balance sheet by now, especially since Kiva was one of the business plans in the first year of our platform, and PayPal took them over after a couple of years. So what I did find extremely inspiring on the Bid Network platform was you would find entrepreneurs that were doing amazing things, small scale, with on a shoestring, and making a big difference to a lot of people. And one example that always stayed with me was Honey Care in Kenya. So there's a guy in Kenya who wanted to become the biggest exporter of honey from Kenya. He had no honey. So he basically set up kits for farmers and got some of his drivers to drive around to farmers and explain to them how to keep a beehive and collect the honey, and promise to buy the honey, let's say a month or two further down the line. And lo and behold, he became one of the largest exporters of honey from Kenya. So what I love about this example, it's you have a technology which is a business in a box. You're bringing it to farmers. Farmers are the small scale business. They're generating extra income from this. The pollination on their farms is going much better. And at the same time, this company is growing with the export of high quality honey from Kenya. So it was from that example that I thought, okay, we need to figure out ways that we can accelerate hundreds, if not thousands, of entrepreneurs through either some kind of platform or technology to make that work. And just before I forget to mention it, there's a Dutch organization called Single Spark who put together these almost like IKEA manuals on how to run very simple businesses. They've been extremely successful at getting soap making businesses, candle making businesses, honey, you name it. And another example of that is at the University of Delft. They created an open source hardware platform for plastic recycling called Precious Plastics. So this is another example of, you have a repository of know-how. It's being added to. It gets shared to many entrepreneurs that can use the designs to create their own recycling facility for plastic. So it was through Bid Network that actually got some name and fame in its heyday in the, let's say, 2009-10. That at the same time Barack Obama was elected in the US, and Barack Obama had grown up in Indonesia. So one of the first things he did was go to Cairo and try and repair the damage that his predecessor had made, calling the Muslim world the axis of evil. So at the university in Cairo, he did a speech and reached out to the Muslim world saying, I want to contribute $1 billion to promoting something the US does quite well, which is entrepreneurship. However, the US didn't really have a platform in emerging markets in Muslim countries, Muslim majority countries, to roll this kind of program out. So they reached out to me, and together with 29 other advisors, and invited us over to the White House in Washington, and to brainstorm how is the US going to fulfill on this promise of dishing out $1 billion to entrepreneurs in Muslim countries. And I knew next to no one in the room except, of course, Barack Obama, his face at least. And anyway, there was some introductions, some chit chat, and then a break. So during the break, I saw some people go outside for a smoke. So I thought at the time I was smoking as well. Why not go outside and join them and find out who these people are? And there was this gentleman there with a very colorful shirt, batik shirt, smoking a very sweet cigarette. I didn't know who he was, but his name was Putra Sampurna. And only later that day, I found out that he was one of the wealthiest people in Indonesia. And we kind of got along very well because I didn't know who he was. So I just treated him as an equal. We were joking around. I was joking about his horribly flavored cigarettes, not knowing that he was actually the manufacturer of those cigarettes. And so he invited me over for drinks. Anyway, over a period of 2 years of him coming to my house, me going to his house, we built up this friendship. And after 2 years of trust, he invited me over to Indonesia to basically replicate the model that we had created with the BID network. So in 2012, I decided, okay, let's go for this. Move over to Indonesia, and the initial plan was, so this is where, you have a Western concept in your mind, you think you can replicate what you've done well, and you go to a completely new country, and so I go there thinking, Sharia finance is actually quite similar to equity finance. So we should create the first equity finance platform for startups in Indonesia, because that's going to fly. But of course, once you get there and you come with your plans, everyone says, well, yeah, there isn't a single investor in Indonesia that will trust putting their money into someone else's business that they don't know the family of. And of course, an entrepreneur will never accept the money of someone he doesn't know either. So, yeah, lending is the mode of financing in Indonesia. Equity is something for really big ticket deals. And so we eventually together came up with the plan of creating the first online lending platform for Indonesia. But it had to be done well. So we weren't going to do this sort of consumer finance, which you see many of these, the Prosper and lending clubs do. But we decided, okay, we need to help family businesses. We need to help impactful businesses. So we'll focus on women producers, and we'll focus on farmers, and we'll provide them with, sizable amounts of finance, around $2,000 to $3,000. So no microfinance. But the problem is Indonesia is huge. I mean, it's 6,000 kilometers across. It's 2,500 from north to south, with 17,000 islands, depending on the tide, of course. And so we needed a network of agents who would be in the field with a mobile app, punching in the information on the entrepreneur, so that we would use the agent as our conduit to pull in the applications. We would vet them, and then through bank transfers, we'd get the money out to the entrepreneurs. So within 8 months, we had dispersed $3 million to 800 entrepreneurs. And then we found out that the agents were defrauding us. So again, this is classic mistake. The foreigner thinking this is going to work. We're very smart. We have our technology. We have our control systems, and we know how to keep a tab digitally on our agents. But they were a lot smarter than us. So we then had to pivot very quickly, and then realized through lots of advice around me, local advice, that there were many savings and credit cooperatives in Indonesia that were basically getting loans, microloans, doing savings, but a lot more could be done with these entrepreneurs. So what we decided to do is leave the credit cooperatives to actually do the lending and saving work themselves, because that's what they're good at. And we then added value to help the entrepreneurs grow. So we would basically set up a securitization. We set up a securitization platform. In other words, to buy the best productive loans from the cooperatives, sell them to the Jakartans or Jakartan banks, so in the center, which would release a lot of money to the cooperatives to be able to lend again. So we basically looked very carefully at the financial crash in Washington, at CDOs and how they were structured, and managed to create the first securitization platform in Indonesia after creating the first online lending platform for small businesses. And then realized, okay, so how are we going to create value? So the next step was to implement an accounting and banking system, core banking system, it's called Sylvia Banking, into the credit cooperatives, so that we can actually see what's happening, see who the clients are, and be much quicker at buying and selling these loans. The next step is then, okay, if we provide mobile apps to these entrepreneurs, we can actually help them start to lend to each other. So they don't need to pay high rates to the cooperative, or even allow them to pay virtually through the app to each other, or save with each other. So we were implementing that phase as the Corona crisis and pandemic happened. And then we had a lot of trouble, which we had to clear up. So by this time, we were dealing with 60,000 entrepreneurs across Indonesia, not a million, but in the thousands, and with a loan book of around $11 million at any time. And I thought, with the pandemic, we just need to clean up the house. We need to make sure collections are working. And the company's doing well now, but I decided to quit. Then, living in Bali, I thought, okay, what Indonesia needs. So anyway, I didn't take a break. I just keep going, create an impact fund without a fund. So in Bali, I met Nico and Tom and Oki and Hugo. Together, we set up the Bali Investment Club, and basically try to create a fund on a shoestring. And not far from us, and also participating in this event, is Mason Tan from Singapore, who has been very successful at creating, I think, the first impact fund in the area. So with the Bali Investment Club, we thought, okay, how can we do this relatively cheaply? So we basically set up a brokerage, finding good deals, impactful deals, such as Bukapeo, which is helping housewives become home chefs, and people can order online and have it delivered home. So Indonesia is great for this. Indonesia understands social media, technology, the mobile phone. And so again, this way through Bukapeo, by investing through them, thousands of housewives are helped to become chefs in their home and earn a substantial extra income. Another example of a business that we're looking at is a pyrolysis business called Purple. So taking in non-recyclable plastic and converting it to diesel on very small islands in Indonesia. And a third business, which also falls in line with my original thinking, which is, okay, how can we find small-scale initiatives which can scale up and have an impact and be decentralized? Another example is NFT, so non-fungible tokens can be used to create many shops for small businesses, especially artisans, musicians that are selling non-physical artwork. So that's an area that we're looking into. Now, the final step, and I'll almost finish here, Robert, I decided to take up 30 minutes of your time, is in October last year, a very, very dear friend of mine from university called me and he said, Terry, I have a challenge for you. I'm sure you'll like it. So Pedro Moracosta, who had set up EcoSecurities, I think he's probably the godfather of carbon trading, had then gone on to set up the Green Exchange of Rio, BVRio.org, said, you know, all these multinationals, the consumer goods companies that are pumping out packaging into the rivers, the oceans, the streets, have made a commitment. They actually want to collect 50% or more of the packaging that is lying around. But the problem is these centralized approaches in emerging markets, so Indonesia, India, Brazil, Vietnam, the countries that we're dealing with. The issue is that the centralized approach of waste collection, municipal waste collection, is only managing to collect 40 to 50% of the waste. So again, here we need to find a decentralized, small-scale but scalable approach to collection. Now, and lo and behold, in all these countries, there are literally millions of waste pickers who are earning about 50% of the minimum income. So we've been extremely fortunate also through the work of BVRio to be asked by Tetra Pak, which has a product which is very difficult to recycle, but it can be recycled, to see how we can use a very different approach to collecting Tetra Pak cartons in Vietnam, 15,000 tons a year, using the informal sector. So we developed, again, technology is a key to being scalable at a small scale or with small scale businesses. So we developed an app called Collect, Kolekt, and through that it becomes a trading app. So it means that homes, apartments, shopping malls, shops can offer their waste on the app. Waste pickers know where to go and collect it. For every kilo of Tetra Pak cartons, Tetra Pak will subsidize their kilo price so that their income goes up to the minimum wage. And then the packaging is sold on to collection centers, to sorters, shredders, and recyclers. So, for the time being, I will be focusing most of my effort on being a professional garbage man in emerging markets and hoping to get informal sector collectors to earn more money and improve their quality of life at a profit. Thank you.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Your father was a banker, and you became a banker, and now you're in the extortion business for garbage with Tony Soprano.
You're calling me a banker?
So
yeah. No. So it's
were you
interesting.
were you sad that you had to? Well, it didn't shut down, but you had to leave. Makar, which was the name of the company that you had set up in Indonesia, and now you're back, in the Netherlands, and your kids were going to school there. Wasn't that a big change for you, and wasn't it hard? And would you have preferred to stay with Makar and see it through? I mean, 60,000 is still a lot of people.
Yeah, it could have been a hell of a lot bigger, because it's interesting. So there was still a hell of a lot of work to do in Indonesia, and if it'd been up to me, I think we would have stayed. But I have a wife and 2 kids who actually much more prefer to be back here in the lowlands. Even though they were going to a fantastic school, the Green School in Bali. It's a very famous school. But I realized through the work that I do with BV Rio that I can actually contribute a lot internationally. And these days, like we're meeting up here, we have attendees from everywhere in the world. It is possible to do these things if you have trustworthy people on the ground. So with Makar and with the Makar platform, I just wanted to say the credit cooperatives that are at the forefront of financing the rural people in Indonesia finance 25 million people. Wow. And the banks, Indonesia has 119 banks, God knows why, but together they finance 22 million people. So there is so much work to be done on the front of cooperatives, and I recommend and encourage anyone to get out there. Of course, there's a lot of fraudsters, but there's some amazing work being done. So there's a lot of savings that can be done. There's the use of mobile phones is very high in Indonesia. And therefore, there's a lot that you can do with the clients or the members of these cooperatives. Many of them are farmers, and yeah.
What do you what was the most important? I mean, I think you were there 5, 6 years, 7 years. It was a while that you were in Indonesia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was the most important lesson that you learned that when you meet other people, wow, that sounds great. I really want to go start a social enterprise in Pakistan or Afghanistan or Turkey or somewhere. What was the most important lesson that you learned that you can share with those listening?
Don't be the leader to start with. Be in the background. Listen a lot. And see where you can contribute on a small scale to start with, so that you are basically learning. So you don't make this silly sort of stubborn mistake I made of arriving there thinking we got to create an equity platform like Equity Zen or Crowdcube or something like that. So I think that is the start. So I think being more of an advisor rather than CEO is a much better thing. And in Indonesia, for sure, in most Asian countries, as a foreigner, it's always best to be more in the background. But you've, as I always say in Indonesia, it has to be nasi goreng flavor.
And I'm sure that your benefactor Putra had a big network, lots of friends, wealthy friends. Did it influence their behaviors as, maybe we should be doing something along these lines?
Influence them or their friends?
Well, influence the network of Putra. I'm sure he's he's a very wealthy guy, so I'm sure lots of people kind of looked up to him, and he golfs or whatever he does and hangs out with other people, wealthy investors. Did they ever say, tell me a little bit about this? Maybe it's something for me. Did it influence the behavior of other investors in Indonesia?
Well, I think a couple of misconceptions. One is very wealthy people usually don't have that many friends because it's very difficult. No, it's very difficult to know who your real friends are. Everyone's sort of looking up to you, as you say. And I think that's where the trust came between us that, if it didn't work out, too bad, but we had a laugh together. And that was the attitude in our conversations. So he invested, and he managed to convince, let's say, a couple of other banks, but let's say the generation under him, he's now 72 years old. Mm-hmm. So his son and his generation, they are really busy getting rich. Even though they are filthy rich, they still don't consider it to be rich enough. So the returns have to be at least 15% upwards. Wow. And whereas Putra Sampurna is someone who was looking for much more long-term strategies. So that's why he decided to buy the bank. He created a bank, converted it from a consumer bank into an SME bank, SME lending bank, but he realized this is not going to make money overnight. This is something that's going to take at least 10 years. And doing sustainable forestry. Yes, he asked my advice quite a lot on finding specialists to get sustainable forestry going, getting his banking operations modified. So let's say I changed his way of thinking a bit. He changed my way of thinking.
And why weren't you, or maybe you tried, able to replicate this model in Cambodia or Thailand or Philippines? I would think it's similar situation. The need for SMEs and startups and funding. And you had an infrastructure. Couldn't you take that into other countries?
Well, I guess that's let's say more of a personal problem with me, is that I tend to get bored of things once they're up and running. So, I'm never going to be running a conglomerate, which is sort of creating a huge franchise. I always like to be at the beginning and tinker around with the early structures of a business. So yes, there is a lot of potential there, especially, I mentioned the securitization of microloans. This is being done on a huge scale in India. It's being very professionally run. The central bank has a lot of checks and controls on it. In Indonesia, we were new. It was completely new and people didn't understand it, but they bought it. And it was very beneficial for the credit cooperative. So this kind of securitization or selling packages of microloans, second-hand loans, as it were, that could be very easily replicated in other countries. And there's a lot of demand for that.
Cool. We have a request from Adriana to join the panel, so I'm accepting her, grabbing the mic. There she is. Hello, Adriana.
Oh, hi. I'm sorry I'm not looking very glamorous, but I'm sitting here in Malaysia.
You should look at us.
I should turn off the camera. I feel a little embarrassed. I'm in my pajamas. But anyway, I'm sitting here in Malaysia, and I just have to ask, because I find it a common, what I think is a problem, is that we look at, you mentioned that you're going to become a professional garbage collector. Mm-hmm. And for me, the issue is that we think waste or rubbish or discarded items is the problem, because obviously there's so much of it and it's so visible. And so we focus all our attention on that. when, as far as I'm concerned, working in the circular economy, where the focus should be the development of a secondary raw materials industry, it's demand driven. So if you create enough demand for products or items or secondary raw materials, if you focus your attention not on the waste, but on the demand side, then really we have all the technology, we have the brains, we have the ability to create the infrastructure to bring all the pieces from the front end together. But we don't do that because there's simply not enough demand pull to warrant the coordination of that. And so my question is, after this long little speech, is that perhaps your energy is misplaced. Perhaps your energy should be more focused on the demand side rather than on the supply side, which is a really very busy space. There's really a lot of people working, or they think that it's the problem is the waste, where I don't think it is. I think the problem is the demand side. So that's my question.
No, clear. And so in Indonesia, the information we are getting from our clients is that there is a lot of demand and there's not enough supply. So, which is a very positive thing. But in most countries, it's the other way around. But of course, the demand is very, very specific to uncontaminated, very clean PET, LDPE, HDPE, all the different types of plastics and rubber and metal and what have you. So in the projects that we're doing in Vietnam, Adriana, you're exactly right. So what we first do is we go to recyclers and we secure offtake agreements with them. So they say, if you can get it to us at this level of contamination, this price, this volume per month, we'd be very happy to sign an agreement to purchase this on a monthly basis. With that agreement, we then go one level down to, let's say, the large scale waste sorters, and we get a similar agreement from them. So once we know that the demand is there and we know what their price for the material is, that's when we start, let's say, pushing from the supply end, which is through the app, getting people to offer waste. No, so you're right. It's demand driven. Now, we recently did a study together for IFC in Brazil, Peru, and Chile, and it still dazzles me that IFC. We asked them, what kind of investments are you looking for in this space? IFC has a completely centralist, trickle-down thinking approach. So $100 million plants will do 20%, will help you find the other 80%. But the big issue in these countries is the inability to collect and sort. So there needs to be collection and sorting investments as well, which are much smaller and not interesting for a big player like the IFC. So we tried to convince IFC that they should come up with a facility that allows them to aggregate or distribute the investments on a much smaller scale at the municipal level, where you have sorting facilities, because once you have that in place, then you're able to feed the big recyclers. So yeah, part of this is a chicken and egg problem.
And but it seems like in a lot of the developing world, whether it's Indonesia or Thailand or Philippines, there seems to be plastic everywhere. Everywhere. Is there any effort at all to try to reduce the flow, or to have people not just throw it away? Because you're working specifically only in Indonesia with this Recollect, or is it in other countries?
Vietnam, Indonesia, and Brazil.
And this is, so you get compensated by the collection of the plastic or the waste, and that and subsidized by a bit like Tetra Pak or others.
That's right. Multinational sets a target to us, and they agree to a price per ton collected.
Oh, okay. But I would think that a lot of the big multinationals like Coke or that would be very keen on this because they're getting beat up with this horrible reputation that they're building, that most of the plastic bottles in the ocean are from Coke.
Yeah, it's, I mean, incredible. A month ago, for the first time, the statistic dazzled me that the amount of plastic produced every year is the same weight as the whole human race together. It's incredible. And yeah, so in emerging markets, which are of course the fastest growing markets, 40% of that is being collected and put into landfills or incinerators. And the rest of it, maybe 9% to 12% is being recycled.
And what is
it is a real challenge.
What is your aim with this new social enterprise? What you want to, hit 50% of all waste to be recycled or collect? Because it seems quite large. You have the ease of consumption, the large manufacturers not really spending a lot of time on creating alternatives. You have everybody saying, well, we're going to build power plants that convert the plastic to waste through this pyrolysis system, and it's going to be lower CO2. But I don't see the big stuff.
What do you mean the big stuff?
I don't see very, very large scale solutions to a problem that is overwhelming. There's no big, even IFC, whose job is poverty alleviation. Try going to them with any project that's even in profit, that's not, as you say, 100 million or 200 million. They like airports. They like doing stuff like that.
Well, here in the Netherlands, most of the waste is actually converted to energy use. But I don't know if you've seen some of the documentaries. A lot of the sludge that comes out of that is actually not fully burnt. And so there's a lot of chemical waste and other materials that are ending up in the ground soil or in foundations of buildings and motorways. In India, there's a huge market for plastic going into furnaces to burn for cement. So yeah, the easiest solution, which is not environmentally sound, is a waste to energy solution. But yeah, you are now seeing with the pressure from all fronts, and also what is, I think, one of the most wonderful pieces of regulation to enter these emerging markets is the extended producer responsibility, so EPR regulation. So it means, for example, in India, by the end of this year, 10% of all the packaging needs to have been collected and either been recycled or disposed of responsibly. If the companies don't achieve that, penalties will arise. So Vietnam, Indonesia are also enforcing this. The UK and the EU have also introduced taxes on single-use plastic production. So these taxes are sending price signals to consumer goods companies, which makes them understand that it is actually much better to organize the collection properly instead of wait for penalties and taxes to hit them. So what I would like to achieve with this is that we are not just focused on the waste, but we are also enabling the informal sector, the waste pickers, the collection centers that are earning less than minimum wage, to earn a livable wage and organize themselves, get better clothing, pensions, insurance, what have you. So that they also benefit from this waste trend and hype, which is happening and is here to stay.
What can this audience that is listening to the live session and the ones that will listen to the tape session, it's also being streamed to YouTube live, what can they do to help you?
One is get consumer goods companies to agree to comply with something they signed, I think 4 years ago with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is to collect. So there's 500 multinationals that have agreed to collect X% of everything they produce. And most of them are only at 10% of that target. So what they need to do is to pay at least $100, maybe $200 a ton of waste. And that money doesn't come to consultants like us. It actually goes to paying for capex or equipment. It goes to increasing the salaries and the earnings of the waste pickers and informal sector. So that is, I think, critical. The other is, if you want to start your own initiative in waste collection and create your own ecosystem, download the app Collect, Kolekt. It's on the Android, Google Play Store now. Next week, at the end of the week, it'll be on the App Store for the iPhone users among us. And you can start trading together today. So it works in Indonesian, in Vietnamese, Portuguese, and English.
And are most of the large corporates that are producing all of this single-use plastic or single-use packaging, are they calling you, say, hey, can we talk because we have a real serious problem? Can you help us in Colombia or Venezuela? Well, maybe not Venezuela, or Brazil or Mexico, or Ghana or Nigeria.
There are a couple of players that are really serious about this issue and really want to get their collections up. Number one is Danone and Tetra Pak. We are seeing very serious projects being done on the ground. Unfortunately, for example, Danone wants to do everything in-house. So if they actually convert their management fees and costs and everything to a ton, it comes to over, let's say, $150 a ton, what they're spending trying to collect, a couple of thousand tons. If they organize this more professionally, they could scale this up much, much faster. Unfortunately, most of the other consumer goods companies are basically doing the fig leaf approach, with very small projects, beach cleanups, which are very good. They're very photogenic, but they are not tackling the root cause of the problem. And I think what also needs to be done is redesign and less use of non-recyclable packaging. And that doesn't only include plastics.
You're preventing plastics to end up in garbage dumps, which will ultimately create methane.
Yeah.
Are you able to capture any of those potential carbon credits that might accrue from the work you're doing, or is it too complex?
Yeah. So generally, for a ton of plastic that doesn't get recycled, you could say that about 2 times its weight, so 2 tons of carbon, is being emitted, because we need to produce new plastic to replace the plastic that's gone. And you have issues like methane. So the landfill gas projects are very profitable. So you basically cover up the landfills with the sort of sealant plastic, or not plastic, but it's canvas. With generators on top, it captures the methane. You generate electricity, and at the same time, you're capturing the methane, which is, of course, 23 to 26 times more powerful than CO2. So that is a major issue. Yeah. But the other thing I think a lot of people forget is for example, in Indonesia, 65% of all the waste produced is biomass. And plastic is only 12 to 14%. And we're seeing the plastic because it, of course, doesn't corrode or disappear as quickly. But the biomass itself is also producing methane. So, yeah, in many, let's say, tropical countries where a lot of biomass is produced, composting is something that sort of needs to get into our skull as well. Composting and using compost for farming instead of using chemical fertilizers. So, yeah, I think we need to also look at the whole range of waste products which are going out there. So number one is biomass. Number two is paper and cardboard, then plastics, then metals. Yeah.
We're coming down to the hour, and I know that you're really busy with your new initiative. So I want to thank you very, very much. But before I let you go, I'd like to take a group selfie with everyone. So all you have to do is to wave to the camera and take a photo, and it will collect all of those different photos and add them into one big postcard, and then I will send that to you. So just, wave to the camera, make a photo of yourself. That'd be great. I want to thank Thierry. You've been fantastic in the work that you're doing, but also I need to thank our entire production crew who helped make this webinar possible. Sam, our producer and crypto genius and ramen critic. Ricky, my absolute better half with no filter. Xi Jinping, our head of transparency and integrity. Donald Trump, our gender diversity lead and dog whisperer. Vladimir Putin, our head of conflict resolution. Jeff Bezos, our phallic symbol designer and space explorer. Richard Branson, our low-carbon transportation genius. Mark Rutte, our memory expert, and Elon Musk, our humility coach. I want to thank them all for making this a great production. So Thierry, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And if we can ever do anything, if you want me to distribute, I'm going to be sending everybody a link with the replay. And if you want me to add anything about the work that you're doing or the link to your new activity, just give me, and you send it on WhatsApp, and I'll add that to that. It usually takes about an hour for the replay to take effect. So thank you all. Thank you very, very much. And
thank you.
Stay safe. See you soon.
Thank you, Robert.
Bye. Okay. This.
I'm just taking some shots of the comments, which are very
I'll
interesting.
send it to you. I'll send you the report. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
no problem.
Yeah.
No problem.
No, they're very interesting.
Yeah, no problem. I'll send you that. That's very easy. Okay, close this, and then we stop the stream. Yes. Thanks again, Thierry. You were great.
Thank you.